for the wind and the tide, or what lies behind the waves that we ride. But the story lives on in the hearts and minds, the loved ones in a little town who are all left behind. A small ocean village made its living from the sea, who were so very proud of his small fishing fleet. 3 captains, 2 were brothers, set sail at early dawn, not knowing what lay waiting were the seas from the storm. On a gray Saturday morning, March 18th of '61, 3 small fishing lines, last trip had begun, a long ways across the Atlantic.
I know it was a little after midnight when that whatever hit us, and it's not, sounded like a big clap of thunder, and the boat rolled way over, and the covers off the stove. Mares was floating around.
Highlights that you remember, and I remember that morning in particular. It was a Saturday morning, and my brother Herbie and I went down to the wharf to see Dad away. Like, I was Dad's oldest son, and Herbie was the youngest. I was 22, and he was 9. And when we got to the wharf, they were just about ready to go. The men were on deck, so I took the stern lines. Skipper Mitchell Taylor said, "Let the lines go." So untied the lines, threw them down to them. My father was on deck. And I remember Neil Williams being in the dory and sort of sitting on the stern, and I threw him the stern line, and he just coiled it down in the dory. Jimmy Shankle was on the bow. I remember seeing Albert Anderson there, and Jimmy Harlow. And we cast them off, and they started out the harbor, and the Muriel Eileen, which is skippered by Lawrence Taylor, Mitch's brother, that left from the fish dock, the other dock, the next one over, and they were going out the harbor ahead of them, so I remember them going out past the breakwater, and I remember my father's boat being behind, and they were sort of following along out through the harbor. And that's the last I remember of seeing him.
We left Lockeport on a Saturday, and we got behind the other 3 boats that had already left, because I had to wait for some crew members, and that put me behind the other boat.
Sometimes she went to port and she went down, and I wound up on top of the other guy on the other bunk on the other side, and she tore through the companionway. The Hickey was quite a big boat, you know. She was quite old, she was quite big.
I could hear it coming, and when it come on to us, the boat started listing, and it was a terrible roar, and of course the boat tried to get up on top of the sea, and it went up about 10-15 feet or so and dropped back, and so it started going back sideways, and a couple of times it raised, and it was carried at a terrific speed to leeward, and I kept walking up on the side of the boat, on the port side, because it was laying starboard side to the wind, and I actually walked off of the floor and onto the side of the wheelhouse.
As a rule, the fishermen in this area preferred to spend weekends with their wives and families. However, due to the poor catches and the mounting expenses of their boats that spring, they decided on March 19th to set sail. The crew of the Hickey were the fortunate ones. But for the other 3 vessels, this decision would prove to change the very fiber of the Lockeport area forever. After days of extensive searching by air and by sea, a gray fog steadily descended upon the small community, touching everyone in its path. Their hopes were finally crushed. Their men would not return.
We all have a boat wave radio. Mostly all the fishing wives did then. And we never turned them off. We always had them on. So I heard Curry talking to Mitch that day. And he had just fixed his radar. He said, I just come from fixing my radar, Mitch. And he said, and I just seen a big ship go down by. Well, they wouldn't tell you what it was like out there then. And Mitch said, have you heard anything from Lawrence? Curry said, no, I haven't heard anything. And he said, the next morning, it was a beautiful day in here, the 21st of March. No wind, no nothing. Sunny day. I went over to my mother's and took her and the kids with me, the rest of them with me, and went over. And when I walked in, Mom was sitting by the radio. And she said, Julia, there's something wrong. I said, go on. She said, there's no boats on, talking. She said, and they're usually on. And I never paid much attention because Mom, well, she's like that. So, anyway, a little while afterwards, she said, guess what? They found the Muriel Eileen awash off Halifax, just as far as sticking out. That's Lawrence's boat. And then a little while afterwards, and I don't know where this, if there had to be someone come on the set on one of the radios on the boat band and tell this. And they said they found wreckage, and some of the pieces was off of the Muriel Eileen and the name. But they said there's no wreckage from the Jimmy sisters. So they searched all that day, and there was still nothing from the Jimmy sisters. And Wendell and Doll Williams was a good friend of ours. And Wendell come up, he said, Julia, don't give up yet, because he has a new boat. His boat wasn't a year old when they were lost. So anyway, Matt Huskelson, they were going to call the search off. And Matt Huskelson said, we're going to resume the search the next day, because he said, the Jimmy and Sisters was a brand new boat, and maybe he could stand the storm. They resumed the search, and then I seen Wendell coming through the field. And he came in, he said, Julia, I never shed a tear, because see, I had hopes that they'd find him, his boat, and then alive. And he come in, he said, Julia, you might as well give up. They just found the buoy and the tag, I think it was, a couple parts of off his boat. And then there was wreckage everywhere, see it all floating all over the water. And, well, it was a terrible feeling. So, when you have, and all them children, I said 17 men, the best fisherman out of Lockeport was gone. I say that, I have to say it. The highline fishermen of Lockeport were gone. And so we went on with our lives. We raised our children. I had a 10-year-old, 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And I used to go to bed, take her to bed with me, Bonnie to bed with me at night. And I lay there and cry, thinking to myself, what's ever going to happen to my children? Well, how will they grow up? And, you know, and it's hard. You don't have a big pile of income, just the widow's allowance you got. And that wasn't very much. And your family allowance was only $5, $5 to $7. Just look how they've all grown up. Every one of those kids from those 17 men. Wonderful kids, and all the grandchildren after that. And they're all wonderful kids. Because I said that last night. I said, well, one thing about it, all the children, we can be proud of them, how we brought them up after that.
Everybody was devastated, of course. But I remember one scene that their father, Gordon, of course, was beside himself with sorrow and so on. And he couldn't convince himself that they were lost. And I remember that beautiful day, his standing outside the house, and Glennis and I were with him, and he was looking out into the water, and he was saying over and over again, if they'd only let me go out there, I could find them. I could find them. I know where they are. If they just let me go out, I could find them. You know, this was, I suppose, part of his grieving. And it was a really heart-rending experience.
Being detoured away from
Yeah.
going fishing. But say it was, you did grow up differently. Although like around the town, there was so many of us all at once, you know, that I think as Heather Taylor said at one point, you didn't feel odd because, well, she said like half her class, you know, lost their father all in that one storm. So you're sort of part of the norm, you know, with it. And it's not like, you know, just if you were just the one. It was like everybody was in the same predicament. And after a couple of weeks, then you start trying to get back to normal. Although I know Mom tried to, as much as possible, to shield most of us kids from it. You know, that we all sort of the goings on in the town at the time, like the memorial service. She didn't want us going to that. There was just various other things, you know. There's obviously after that there's the leftover boat stuff that has to be, you know, looked after. Well, I didn't know about that until years later. You know, sort of what happened there, and you know, with this stuff, because you don't think about it. You know, I mean, there's trawl, there's boat parts, there's all this stuff that's left that somebody has to do something with. And Joe Atkinson did a lot of looking after, you know, that type of thing for her. But as kids, we were all shielded from that. But as you say, I mean, like growing up, we just didn't feel any different than anybody else. We just had, you know, Mom and Dad were one person, you know, from that point onward. And as a general thing, I mean, particularly for myself, I can speak, I think she did a real good job.
Upwards of 16 wives and 65 children, some of them not even born, were suddenly faced with the financial and emotional burdens of raising their families alone, with very limited monetary assistance or emotional support. With no social programs in place at the time, the widows were basically left to fend for themselves.
Now, Marjorie and I mean, we both lived in Rockland there, and we got together. You know, we became very close, and like their family and our family spent Christmas together. You know, we had a big family dinner, and her family was there. But Marjorie did have like her own relatives were in Sable River, so but she still like her children came down to our house, and because we had a great big kitchen where they did all that trawl. I've also had to scrub the floors right after